looks at contributions that players need to make to support the broadcasting system. Today, and right after this appearance, we are on day 4 of a 3-week public hearing on this consultation. We have heard from approximately 20 interveners so far and look forward to hearing from over 100 more. During this hearing, we are exploring whether streaming services should make an initial contribution to the Canadian content system, and if so, where it should go. We are also asking whether this would help level the playing field with Canadian companies who are already required to support Canadian content. Through our hearing, we are building a robust and a diverse public record that will enable us to make decisions in the public interest. Comme vous le savez, le Parlement...
As you know, Parliament has also given us a new mandate to see the law on online news requires that we put in place a negotiating framework that is fair between the news enterprises in Canada and major online platforms. We have published our plan, and we will soon have a public consultation process. Our third area of action is focused behind the scenes, and that is improving the CRTC to better serve Canadians. What I have heard directly from people is that the CRTC needs to move quickly and transparently, given the impact our decisions have on consumers, businesses, and the Canadian economy. We've listened, and we're becoming a faster and more transparent commission. We're doing more to engage with Canadians. We're clearing backlogs. We're looking at our internal processes to see how we can do better, and we're dealing with applications in a more timely way.
Minutes, so maybe I can just end with an earlier thought, which is that Canada's communications sector touches every aspect of our daily lives. We understand the importance of the sector, we understand the importance of our work, and the CRTC will continue to work hard to connect people through technology and through culture. Thank you again for inviting us to appear today. We appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. That was very succinct, and you stuck to your timelines that you told us you were going to. And now we're going to have a question and answer segment. The first one is 6 minutes. And so what will happen is you will get questions, and you will answer, and that is included in the 6 minutes. It's not just 6 minutes for questions. So please remember, everyone, to be as succinct as you possibly can so we could get as many questions in as we possibly can. So we begin with the Conservatives, Ms. Thomas, Rachel Thomas, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Missy Trudees, thank you for being with us here today. We've been looking forward to having you at the table, and it's taken a little while to finally coordinate this, so we appreciate your time. During the debate during Bill C-11, as you're aware, there was great conversation with regards to user-generated content and whether or not it was scoped in. The government tried to insist that it wasn't. What I note, however, is that in their directive to the CRTC, they've had to make that explicit. So they've made the distinction, or they've distinguished for you, that user-generated content is not to be regulated. Now, if that's already not in the legislation, why would that distinction need to be made in your directive?
Thank you for the question. I would say that we know that user-generated content is out. That is clear to us. I can't speak to why something was in a directive or not.
Okay, but if it's not in the legislation, why does that need to be a specific directive given to you?
We do have clarity at the CRTC that user-generated content is not within scope, but I couldn't speak to why it was spelled out in a directive.
Do you not feel that you could have interpreted the legislation without that directive?
I will turn things over to our head of broadcasting to speak a little bit further about that.
Having a directive from government is absolutely within the purview of the government. Because we're arm's length, we don't engage in a long dialogue with them about our understanding of the Act. We received the act. We interpreted it when we received it. The government has fulfilled its or used its power to give us greater clarity. Whether or not we already had realized some of those things or not is something the government wouldn't be aware of because we're arm's length. The government felt that there would be usefulness in giving us greater clarity about the act. We've received it, and certainly we will apply it in the spirit in which it was intended.
So I understand what you're saying here today, and of course, you're going to take that position. I find it very interesting, as do many Canadian creators, that the government tried to insist that user-generated content was not scoped in within the legislation, but then needed to give a directive to the CRTC with regard to that end. That actually suggests that it is, in fact, within the framework of the legislation, hence the need for the directive. Nevertheless, you also mentioned that you function at an arm's length. Your mandate letter says, quote, the independence of the CRTC along with the transparency of its processes will be of the highest importance. However, there is a page on the CRTC's website titled Myths and Misconceptions. And when I read it, it is verbatim the talking points from the minister's office, the talking points that he used over and over and over again in the House of Commons and right here at this committee table. So I'm curious as to who authorized the publishing of the Myths and Facts page.
So I can briefly speak to that and can turn things over to our head of broadcasting. We are an independent quasi-judicial tribunal.
I'm just curious who authorized the publication of that page.
So we are independent. The CRTC.
I understand. I'm just curious who authorized it.
The CRTC did draft those myths and facts in order to provide some clarity for Canadians in terms of what was going to happen with the implementation of the legislation. So that is something that was drafted by and approved by the CRTC.
Okay. Ms. Utrides, as the head of that organization, did you authorize it?
I did.
Okay, thank you. That was simple. I'm now curious because I have this OPQ in front of me, which is an access to information that members of Parliament, of course, can submit. And in it, one of the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Shields, was what type of communication took place between the department and the CRTC? And one of the things that went from the department over to the CRTC was, quote, media lines and questions and answers. That doesn't speak of independence. Why would the Heritage Department send you media lines and questions and answers if you're functioning at an arm's length?
So I can tell you with full certainty that we absolutely are independent. I do know that our communications team sometimes does share some communications information, not for comment, but just for information.
Okay, but questions and answers. Could you not come up with those on your own if you're supposed to be functioning independent?
Again, I can't speak to exactly what was shared, but the communications teams do sometimes share some communications information for information.
Okay, so not exactly independent. One of the things that is said by the CRTC is that content and digital creators will not be regulated. Of course, on September 29th, out came a podcast registry. Now, I understand that you will try to lead this committee to believe that you are not actually regulating podcasters, but rather the platforms. But what's interesting is that podcasters rely on those platforms in order to get their podcasts out. And of course, by regulating the platforms, those that use them are in fact regulated. For example, if a bookstore is mandated that they can only sell red books, that doesn't impact the publishers. The publishers aren't being regulated. In fact, they are, because of course, if they publish a blue book, its sales are going nowhere. A green book, its sales are going nowhere. So in looking after the platform or mandating things to the platform, you are in fact mandating those that are producing content. Is that not true?
And I'll be very clear with this, we are not regulating individual podcasts. We are not regulating podcast content, and we are not regulating podcast creators.
Sure. I understand that you're not doing that directly, but you are doing it indirectly, and it's a distinction without a difference. We'll leave it there.
So if there's time to respond to that, perhaps I could explain what that decision did, which... Okay, thank you. Which was ask that large platforms provide basic information like contact information with respect to their services, and that would include podcasts. And that is the extent of it. So I wouldn't say that it's that we are regulating in that
Why
space.
are you asking for registration?
I'm sorry, your time is up. Oh, no, sorry, you have a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't see the one there. Pardon?
Don't.
Pardon?
6 minutes.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, I think you've gone over time. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to the stopwatch. Thank you. And so now